If you're a football fan and you know the Big Ten and you know USC and you know the history of both, you know that this is just a tremendous power brand merge right here between these two. But there is so much more that goes into this partnership between USC and the Big Ten, and we will delve into it over the next 60 minutes on our USC live show. Welcome, Trojans fans, and all college football fans are welcome, of course, here. Matt Zemek on the line, of course. He is the guy that makes this all work. Catch his work on Trojans Wire. Matt, how you doing today?
Doing all right. And, the realignment cycle has cooled down, and, that's what the Pac-12 wanted. It's not what the Big 12 wanted, but it is what the Pac-12 wanted, so that members, might not make any panic moves. They wanted things to settle down. They wanted the temperature in the room to go down. That is what has happened. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything, but it certainly improves the Pac-12's odds of holding together. And now we have this story from Tuesday morning from who else? John Wilner, that the University of California System's Board of Regents is going to meet on July 21st to discuss UCLA's exit. Now, I don't think this is going to block UCLA's move. I think most people would say there's nothing that can be done at this point. If the internal power players within the UC system had wanted to stop this, they would have, or at least they would have mounted a lot more resistance. But that having been said, is there a plot twist? Is there a soap operatic turn in store for us? You never fully know. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that closed session on July 21st.
Matt, to your first point, there does seem to be a bit of a settling in where there was a frantic pace of rumors and possibilities just off of the USC UCLA move that, oh, well, the Big Ten is going to run and tear up half of the ACC or continue its purge of the Pac-12. And what's the SEC going to do to counter? And there's been some rumblings of some discussions that, okay, between the SEC and the Big Ten, they've seen just about all the value that they can see out there outside of Notre Dame. And maybe there's going to be a settling at 16 or just above that.
I think the best way to look at it, Mark, is we're going to see the landscape settle for the next 3 years. But long term, I don't. Like in 2025, when the 12-year playoff deal expires, what else happens in 2025? Notre Dame's television deal with NBC, that contract expires. So Notre Dame would then renegotiate that particular deal. Also in 3 years, any ACC school looking to get out of the conference, the grant of rights, waiting 3 years, the exit fees attached to getting out of the ACC would be much less. So I think the best way to view it is, for the next 2-3 years, you're not going to see another significant piece of the chessboard change, most likely, primarily because the Big Ten's waiting on Notre Dame as the first domino, and I don't think Notre Dame's going to leave its independent status behind. I think Notre Dame likes being an independent. So if Notre Dame remains static in place, then the other chess moves, they're just going to have to wait. And I think that 2025, with the end of the current playoff deal, and of course, you know that the SEC and the Big Ten in their expanded formats, their expanded sizes, they're going to want all the at-large bids they can get from a playoff, which means that the 2026 and beyond postseason format is going to have at least 12 teams, and that probably will be the trigger that unleashes another fresh series of moves. But so again, I was wrong in thinking that Oregon and Washington were going to immediately go to the Big Ten. I was wrong. All right, I can just admit that. So we do seem to be in a situation where nothing else of really seismic significance or importance is going to happen in the near term. But after 2025, I think that some pretty big changes are coming around the bend. But which ones and which schools are going to move where, that's the unknown. But we are going to see, I think, some significant movements later in the decade.
So as I mentioned off the top, for the football fan, there's the obvious benefits to both the Big Ten and USC in this merger, but we've got Tony Altamore on the line to help us delve deeper into what true value USC brings to the Big Ten in academics and media base and fan base size and all of that. And then the reciprocation from the Big Ten and its benefits to the USC tradition. So, Tony, how you doing?
Good. Sorry about that, guys. We, in typical Florida style, lost all power there for a minute.
But you're good to go. Well, thanks for hustling back to join us as soon as possible. Tony has joined us on just so many occasions here in the last few weeks, consultant and strategist. And welcome home, Tony, of sorts, a USC alum.
It is home.
All right.
No, I went to USC for undergrad. So, and we're actually worked in the athletic department for 4 years. So it's always good to be back in Trojan land, if only virtually.
Well, Tony, I got to ask you. So, okay, if you've worked there, then I mean, like, you would certainly know what this means for USC. Like, what, just put aside your consultant hat for a moment, just as an alumnus. Like, did you have like a natural reaction? I'm sure you did.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we got you now.
I vaporized. Sorry.
Second.
I think our internet is still struggling to come back from welcome to Florida weather. I'm sorry, Matt, what were you asking?
I'm sure you had a reaction just as a Trojan, you know, tossing aside your consultant hat. Just what was your initial reaction as a Trojan to all of this?
Well, I was thrilled because not only am I a Trojan, but my dad played for Duffy at Michigan State, and I grew up in Michigan. So it's bringing my Big Ten self and my SC self together. I actually thought that I actually had put out a thing. I wrote up the thing a couple of years ago, actually saying that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 should merge, just in some regard, and actually come together as one. Maybe getting rid of a couple of brands, but I thought it was fantastic. I thought it made sense. I thought it was smart. It's not the thing that happened while Mike Garrett was putting through the office. I can tell you that. It's definitely not the type of thing that was going to happen under Lynn Swan, nope. But it's a great move. It's a smart move, and I think it's not going to be as hard as a lot of other people think. I also did a lot of stuff in fundraising and development, and so from a fundraising standpoint, one of the silliest things, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is that for USC, the more opportunities we can have to put USC in New York and DC and Chicago, the better. We don't raise money in Pullman. We don't raise money in Lincoln either, but we raise money when we're in New York. So it's like, give us those Rutgers games every time. I was there last time. Our DC game with UVA and everybody from Washington was there. Those are good games for the school. And so we're going to have more of them, and I love it. But what I thought was interesting, Matt, is that right now we're seeing all sorts of craziness with everybody trying to flee. But this is, a lot of people don't realize, this is not the first time we've done this. And in fact, the LA Times headline was almost exactly the same last week as it was in 1957 when we did this exact same thing. I jokingly called that the coup d'etat because we got sick of issues with sharing revenue with the Northwest schools. And also there was a lot of rampant cheating, particularly with UCLA, and a lot of conflict with the conference being run by the Northwest schools. And UCLA and Cal and USC got sick of it. And they literally overthrew the conference and imploded it. A lot of it had to do with the crazy Ronnie Knox mess from back then, but we literally did exactly the same thing. And then about a month later, Washington joined us. Skipping, and that just floored the Northwest, and that did the conference in.
And just to be clear for people watching here on the Voice of College Football, this is about the dissolution of the Pacific Coast Conference and the formation of the AAWU,
which became the Pac-12. One of the big things that is a huge mistake. So once everybody kind of made nice again in 1964, we pretended that decade never happened. And they pretend, if you read the Pac-12's history, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It seems nonlinear because it's not. There is no relationship really between the Pacific Coast Conference and today's Pac-12. It ended like the Russian Revolution style ended, sort of like the Romanov dynasty ended in 1957. And then it was going to be the Big Four because Stanford didn't really want to join until a meeting in 1959, literally 9 days before the new conference was opening. and they agreed. Stanford agreed to join, but only on condition that UCLA was not allowed to vote. And so UCLA from 1959 to 1964 was not allowed to vote in the conference. They were considered an offshoot of Cal again, and only the president of the University of California could vote. And then they were still so mad at Oregon that when Oregon came back, the deal was UCLA got their vote back. And since then, the chancellors have been in charge. And as you guys may have seen in the news even today, athletics are a chancellor issue at UCLA and Cal. They are not a president or regent level issue. So you're going to see, I think, some issues with that right now.
Tony, before you continue, how do you think this affects the July 21st UC Board of Regents meeting? What do you think is going to go on at that meeting? A lot of people certainly want to know.
It's a closed meeting to talk to the lawyers, so it's probably just reviewing the typical type of legal things that normally, if this wasn't such a big secret, you probably would have just done beforehand. You know, the regents have to have a discussion about it, but it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, so you don't expect any kind of plot twists or fireworks at this meeting?
No, although I'll tell you, it would not surprise me, and we can get into this in just a sec. One thing that would not surprise me, actually, here, we'll put this slide up as an example, is if somehow Stanford and Cal ended up in it with us. The Big Ten Academic Alliance integrates things like research, integrates leadership development, integrates all purchasing across the universities, IT, cybersecurity, all these academic things that matter more to presidents and chancellors than athletics, quite honestly. And if you said to the chancellors at Wisconsin and Indiana and Iowa last year, hey, would you forego $3 million a year in revenue to be able to be completely integrated into Stanford and Cal? I think most of them would write a check. And so, I know this is an unpopular thing. They'll lambaste me in the comments for saying this, but do not be surprised if Stanford and Cal end up at this party before it's over. Maybe even just like Stanford did last time, 9 days before it opens. So I would, if you take a look here, these are the top 10 power conference universities by academic ranking. And this is averaging the Wall Street Journal Times ranking and the US News ranking, which are the two biggest. The Big Ten is making academic moves. It's no secret that they have number 3 and number 6. Well, there's 3 number 6s. They just added number 5 USC and number 6 UCLA. They're after that other number 6 Notre Dame. I mean, number 1 is just sort of sitting there, and again, would be a very, very advantageous move to the Big Ten for them to add our 2 San Francisco Nemesis. And I know you can all tell me what the Fox guy told John Canzano or whatever, but if you're going to ask me, thinking like any university president in the country, with maybe 2 exceptions, they would all leave their job tomorrow to be president of Stanford or chancellor at Cal. All of them. So it would not surprise me in the least if you saw somehow Stanford and Cal end up at the party. It might be a late admission. It might be a +1. They might sneak through the window. Who knows? But don't be surprised if they end up at the party, I think.
And what kind of timetable would you assign to that?
That's a real good question. I think it would have to depend on Notre Dame. I think it would be with Notre Dame, because I honestly think that Notre Dame will end up at the party as well. Whether that's a year or 2 or whatever. I think that they will also. They're probably a little more noble than we are. They're going to keep the Pac-12 alive. They're going to resuscitate it a little bit before they go. We just kind of pieced out. There was again, this is a little bit of what happened in 1957, sort of redux again, where Cal was the one who brought everyone together. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all if Cal did a little bit of healing there too. But if you take a look at the metrics of the Big Ten, like the what value we bring to it, thinking about that, and I put Notre Dame in here too, because I think they will probably end up with us. If not, it's a good reference point. So this is looking at the 3 different metrics that university administrators look at when they look at conference alignment. And the Big Ten talked about, I think the Big Ten divides it into 4, but it's the same stuff. They look at institution, academic, and resources. They look at the market, and they look at athletics and football. And they also look at culture and values alignment as well, which we are very aligned with the Big Ten in. The Pac-12 and the Big Ten are pretty much in lockstep in a lot of that. And I mean, when you guys can see this, it sort of ranges. Green is the best in the conference. Red is the worst in the conference. Again, that is just for the conference. So every school in the Big Ten is a good school. And you see, I mean, USC and UCLA, along with Michigan, are on the edge. So we are bringing enormous value to the Big Ten. And you know why they wanted it. I mean, to get their hands into UCLA and USC academically is a dream for them, which is why I think, don't count out Stanford and Cal quite yet. You also have, enormously intertwined relationships. Dr. Johnson from Ohio State plays a 3-sport athlete from Stanford. Another reason I don't think we should count out Stanford yet, although she was a little cold in the interview and called out on that. Dr. Folt from USC did her freshman year at Ohio State. Mike Bone is tied into Ohio State. Martin Jarman is one of Gene Smith's proteges at Ohio State. So you have a lot of those connections. I mean, they're connected through the AAU. The AAU president emeritus is back as acting president of Michigan. The brand new Wisconsin chancellor was the UCLA law dean until a week ago. I mean, she may have been in Westwood when she voted to let us in. Very possible she's sitting next to Gene Block when she did it still. I don't even know if she's officially started. But you have all those different connections, and it is part of why they're really intertwined. And when you take a look here, the Pac, I call it the Pac-5, but it's the AAU, the first Big Five. Especially look how they fit in. You see massive alignment with those groups, and we hear rumors that Stanford has said we want in the club, we don't care about the money. I don't know if that's true or not, but USC needs the money, UCLA needs the money, we need the money for investment, and we're getting it, but we're bringing a lot to it. I mean, you take a look at whether it's the Olympic medals. I mean, look down in the corner of the Olympic medals for USC and UCLA and Stanford. I mean, it just dwarfs anybody. The rest of the national championships, all that, the Rose Bowls. We 46 Rose Bowls, I think it is, between USC and UCLA. So it's just unmatched, and it's a perfect fit for the Big Ten. But it's also, and people underestimate this, it's a good fit culturally. The Big Ten and the Pac-12 are aligned. So these are just, for example, the Pac-12. These are from last month's. The Pac-12's pride posts mixed with the Big Ten's United as One pride logo that they've been using. So I mean, this stuff, these schools are aligned in this. Sustainability. Those are issues that really matter to, and anybody who's from the SEC or Big 12 or Big 12 are right now rage tweeting at me about sustainability doesn't matter. It's football and Baylor basketball. No, guys, this matters to university executives. This stuff matters, and it matters a lot. As well as, one of the interesting things is the Big Ten is the most successful of the conferences. The Big Ten is the only conference run majority by women. And the funny thing enough, UCLA's Chancellor Block has been there for about 25 years now or something. I think 20 years. But actually, a bunch of the female CEOs of other schools are all promoted and stolen from UCLA as well, and from Stanford. So we are really in alignment with these folks. In fact, actually, I've done some research, and I'm going to put out a new index called the Pow-Her Index this fall. If you want to win football games, you should get a female boss. Is one of the paths actually to victory, and I think we show that as well as anybody in the turnaround of our athletic department. So when we try to think about what value we were bringing, we bring that market, and that LA market is big, but we bring a lot of stuff to all the Olympic sports. I don't know if you USD people, you may not be hearing about it, but the Big Ten people are salivating over the idea of baseball games at USC and UCLA in March. Mm-hmm. In fact, I saw some joking of people being well, why don't we just play Nebraska, Minnesota at USC between our games against USC and UCLA? Rather than under a foot of snow, we'll just as long as they're there, we'll just play an extra game. So I think you're gonna see a lot of that. The money, everyone's covered the money, everyone's covered the competition, but there are other things that are phenomenal for USC and UCLA as well. for example, the Big Ten there's a Big Ten conference center in Chicago where they have all these academic conferences organized throughout the conference. They do things like they have mentees from each other's schools to help specialists in PhD research. They're literally hiring each other's professors and dealing with each other's graduate students in ways that are enormously advantageous to us. UCLA gets a little bit of that already through the UC system, but we don't really. And so for us to now be into this network of literally the most elite, huge research institutions in the country is, I think, a huge, huge value for us. And I hope that they can patch up the Pac-12. Like I think the world is stronger with a stronger Pac-12. They are a little bit of the Lusitania, and we sort of blew a couple holes in the side. But I think that they can fix it, and I think that they can survive. I think they can survive because, quite honestly, and Big 12 Twitter, they're going to get Twitter, fingers ready to just rage tweet at me. But like the Pac-12 schools don't really fit in the Big 12, and I've said this for a decade.
No, they don't.
I love my Big 12 friends. By the way, I was on Sikkim like yesterday, guys. Like I love the Big 12 guys, but it's just they're like, it's like your friend that you don't really want to be your roommate. We all have those. And they don't want you to be your roommate either. Like I have laughed. John Kurtz has been exposed to like Oregon and Utah Twitter and is like, oh my God, I don't think we want this. And it's like, hey, no, you're right, John. You really probably don't. I'm just kidding. I love my Ducks. I only make fun of teams that I love. But I think the Pac-12, the Pac-10, whatever it's going to be, Pac-11, Pac-12 will survive on its own. I think every day that goes by right now, we're getting closer and closer to that. I don't know what you're hearing, Matt. Is that?
Well, I mean, I just have questions for you. One is, how did so many of us, what were so many of us as commentators, pundits, observers, and I include myself in this group, what were we all missing in terms of Oregon and assuming that Oregon would be on the move? Because, we think about the facilities, we think about Phil Knight's money, we think about the excellent football track record and being involved in a lot of big games over the past 10 years, far more than USC, for instance. What were we missing about Oregon? What were we overestimating?
So for one thing,
the Ducks,
if you think about T. Boone Pickens at Oklahoma State, who used to be the guy who would write the check for whatever Oklahoma State needed, and then he died all of a sudden, and those checks ended. I love Phil Knight, but he's 84. He's sort of in legacy mode. He's not running the Oregon athletic department, and so he's not going to be around forever. And probably when he passes, I mean, I'm sure will lots to stand. His by the way, he's given, I think, equally to Oregon and to Stanford. By the way, we forget.
Yeah, he's given a lot to Stanford. Yes. Yeah,
he went to both schools, but Oregon adds a lot of like brand to the young kids, but it's not a esteemed institution like the others. I mean, Oregon's a very good school, but Oregon was never in the academic caliber as the rest of the conference. Which is ironic because in the 50s, Oregon was the haughty academic one, even though they had like open admissions. Like you could just sign your name in the paper and you could go. One of the conditions actually for Oregon and Oregon State to get into the Pac-12 is they actually had to start using admissions criteria. And they were not happy about that, but it was a huge level. Academics matter and research matters, and who these institutions really want to partner with matters. If you look here, this is the Pac-5 with Oregon. You got USC, UCLA, Stanford, Cal, Washington. I mean, these are like Oregon's a great school, but Oregon's on par with Rutgers and Nebraska, not with Michigan and Ohio State and Northwestern. And so as far as the institution goes, Oregon also doesn't add a lot of market. You guys have all seen the TV data and stuff like that. They have a lot of fab fans around the country, and that's awesome, right? Like most schools would kill to have that. Oregon is the number one fan base in the Pac-12 by far, more than us right now, especially while we stink. But they're not really moving the needle. They're not moving the needle institutionally. They're not moving the needle academically. You're not clamoring to be like, what I really, really, really want is for Oregon's professors to mentor my grad students if I'm Michigan or Northwestern. If you're a chemistry or a physics professor at Michigan or Northwestern, do you want your kids to maybe now be able to get into Lawrence Berkeley Lab? Like, oh yes, you'd kill for that. Like, I mean, UCLA, same thing. UCLA Medical Center is one of the best in the world. All the stuff at USC is phenomenal. I mean, all of these are things that they are clamoring, that those presidents clamor for. They don't clamor for like, oh my gosh, what if we could all have jerseys that cause cirrhosis of the eye? That's Oregon's like number one thing. And that's cool. That is great for recruiting. It's won them a lot of games, but it doesn't move the needle institutionally. Ducks, don't at me. I love your school. I would say let you in. I put you on the chart. Just to be clear, Oregon Ducks.
Let me ask you another.
I'd let you in.
Let me ask you another question. John Wilner's discussing, among many other things, he's discussing the merits of, should the Pac-12 now stay at 10 or should it seek expansion candidates? That's one question, but kind of tied into it, Tony, is I have not heard a peep. And this really ties into what you're saying about alignment with academics and research. I have not heard a peep about the idea of the Pac-12 strengthening itself, strengthening its hand by making a play for Vanderbilt. What would you say in terms of weighing the Pac-12 staying at 10 versus making an expansion play for Vanderbilt?
I mean, if they would take it, I would say go for it, but I don't think they'd take it in a minute. One of the elements also when you think about these conference alignments is that there's some schools that play a role in the society that they're in. You think about like Northwestern in Chicago and Vanderbilt in Nashville, but Vanderbilt in the South, right? Like, if this is gonna sound, I'm gonna sound super douchey in saying this, but like the goal of like every girl, if you think back to the 50s, right? Like every girl at Auburn wants to like marry a banker from Vanderbilt. Like it's just Vanderbilt is sort of ingrained in the Southern culture in a very way that it sort of runs that region. I would say a lot like Stanford sort of does in the Bay Area for California. Like Stanford just sort of occupies a role in the society, running the tech companies. I mean, they're all on its campus, that kind of stuff that transcends just football alignment. And so I would think that for Vanderbilt, they need to be mixed in with Alabama and Auburn and Georgia and Tennessee and Kentucky, because like the elite people of their region went to school there. The president of the bank in Alabama went to Vanderbilt, and he probably has a skybox at the Alabama games, but he may well have gone to Vanderbilt. It's a lot like Stanford in LA. But I mean, it would be great. Like you make a phone call, but like for them also for Vanderbilt, they're cashing checks from the SEC. Same with Northwestern. A lot of people don't know when the Ivy League was being forcibly relegated out of Division 1A into 1AA, they went grasping at straws and they were pleading. They really wanted Northwestern. Now at the time, Northwestern was horrid. Northwestern was like worse than UConn is today, has been before Jim Moore. Like Northwestern, I think won like one game in 4 years or something. Yeah. And Ivy League pleaded with Northwestern and they all said no, because they have that role in their society. And I think that is a big thing that transcends it. It's sort of like, USC in LA. One of the things that I said from the beginning is I said USC would never go alone and we would never go with Oregon. That if USC went, I thought we would need all four. I thought that those four schools in California would all sort of like, you think like some Western standoff of everyone sitting there with like two guns pointed at each other. They never wanted to let each other out of their sights for not just for sports. Sports is on the side for donors, for regular students, for professors, for everything. Those four schools have always sort of been in lockstep, but they have sort of been in lockstep of 2 and 2. And so you did see, the two made the move together. And they weren't going to go. USC would not have gone without and just left the other three sort of unattended, I think, in California to run amok and recruit students. And because again, it's not they care a lot more about the McCarthy Honors College students, quite honestly, than they care about Caleb Williams. They don't want to say that, but I'll be totally honest with you, they do. Dr. Sample, who USC's president emeritus, who was my favorite professor I ever had, literally at any level, whether USC, Wharton, high school, whatever, amazing teacher, told me once, he said, we want people to think of us with Stanford and Yale, not with Alabama and Tennessee. And I think that Dr. Sample would be very proud of this, but I'll tell you, Dr. Sample would have had Cal and Stanford along with us. He would not have let them out of his sights. So knowing Dr. Sample, he'd have brought Yale too.
That leads me to another question, Tony, is that when we talk about various possible realignment scenarios, you have heard surely the discussion about, well, these two schools are a package deal. So if these two schools, that they're going to be together, either if they stay or if they go, do you think that in terms of like Duke and North Carolina, like, are they going to be in the same conference no matter what? Florida State, Miami, are they going to be in the same conference no matter what, several years down the line? Or are there various political plot points and tensions which could peel them off in separate directions? Is there any kind of pair that you're looking at this vast national chessboard where you're saying that actually this pair might not be a package deal, or this pair is definitely a package deal? You can pick any one from the several ones that are on the map.
So I think that the money has gotten so big that the difference is that for a school to turn down the offer, I don't think there's anybody who would do it now that USC and UCLA have sort of done it together. I thought that those two USC I thought would not go without somebody, but I would say like North Carolina would also, like if they were to make a move, would probably want to make a move with somebody. But the thing about Duke is that Duke football is so atrocious and so lowly and so unwanted. And quite honestly, Cal is at this point as well, that they've now created a situation where their partner in crime might go with someone else. For example, now that USC and UCLA I would normally say Stanford and Cal would go in lockstep. And Stanford and Cal were in lockstep in the 50s, a little bit rocky, but they were. You think about Duke and Carolina being in lockstep, but now, I mean, if they said to Carolina, do you want in? Duke is not valuable to us. Then, I mean, I think they would be like, okay, we'll take Virginia. We're okay with that. Like, I think they would be okay with that, just because Duke, because the thing about it is especially for the schools that are not big and good at football, you can always schedule somebody in basketball. USC plays Loyola Marymount in basketball. Like, you can play, if you're North Carolina, you can play Duke in basketball twice a year. That's not a problem. That's easy to do. UCLA can play Cal in basketball, not a problem, easy to do. I mean, look, USC's played Notre Dame other than the pandemic year for what, 79 or 90 years or something in a row. So if you want to schedule somebody, it's very doable. But the money is so $60 million. Like, $60 million is not easy to raise unless you're Stanford. Mm-hmm. And so the difference of just automatically day one, you have $60 million more than the next person. Like, I don't think anybody really turns that down. Again, now there's some people that like I said, I didn't think that USC would go alone. And I don't think North Carolina would go alone, but they would go with somebody. Like USC, I thought would have gone with Stanford or with UCLA. Again, I thought it would be all four, and I still am not sold that it's not going to end up all. Don't count out sneaky Cal. We all know. Actually, never in life. Don't ever count out sneaky Cal. We've all been to see those football games.
Let me ask you, Tony, the playoff deal, the current 12-year playoff contract runs out after 2025. And we also have Notre Dame's current NBC TV deal runs out after 2025. So it seems as though the end of 2025 and the start of 2026, that seems to be a point in time when we're going to see more movement. That we might not see many more big movements in the next 12 to 18 months, but certainly like 3-4 years down the line, we're going to see some movements. What should we be looking for at the end of 2025 in terms of the long-term future of college sports and how the map's going to look?
Well, the first thing, do you know when the exclusive ESPN negotiating period ends? Is that after this year?
Can't say I know.
Okay, so one of the things for some of you guys that aren't familiar on this, I know Tim, I saw Tim's on the chat, like probably knows all the details of this, but the way the playoff negotiation work, the playoff contract is right now, it is exclusively with Disney ESPN. Disney owns ESPN, if you don't know that. And so for our folks that are watching, and so there's an exclusive period in that contract that I think it's through the end of this year. I could be wrong. I forget exactly. We can look it up. Until that point, ESPN has the exclusive negotiating rights on the playoff. And so what's going to happen is the reason the Pac-12 and the Big Ten and the ACC were opposed to expanding the playoff right now, and this is just full stop, the answer 100% is that they want multiple networks to bid. They want it to be like the NFL where multiple networks bid and you get double the money because of it. Now, the SEC very much wanted to push through that playoff expansion right now. Why? Because ESPN is their daddy. Quite literally, ESPN is the SEC daddy. And that is the only big winner in that model of playoff expansion they talked about was the Disney shareholders, because it would have been billions of dollars of bonus to them. Instead, it's going to be billions of dollars extra that's going to go to the universities. So the universities are going to win. So that is going to happen, and we're going to see a playoff format that's going to be bid to multiple networks. And that's going to be enormously financially beneficial to every school that's a part of it. And so I think there could well be significant shakeup as that happens. And especially as, the Big Ten is sort of locked in with their financial numbers and the SEC is going to be locked in with theirs. I think we're going to see schools positioning themselves, willing to make deals, willing to align. But I also don't think that we're going to get to a world where it's just, the two conferences and everybody else can go pound salt. There's the Big 12 and the ACC and the Pac-10 are still going to be very relevant. Oregon's going to win a lot of games. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to get Washington winning games. These schools are going to matter. Baylor's going to be good. Oklahoma State's going to be good. Florida State is Miami's going to be really good. Clemson's going to stay good. So, yeah, I think you're going to see more and more power in those conferences. But you're also going to see people being like, do I really want to go into that conference and get hammered? How much am I willing to trade for that? For a full share of the revenue, you might. But these folks that are saying, okay, well, I'd bargain it all away, I'd give it all away, just let me in, you don't even have to pay me, whatever. That's not gonna happen. So I think you're gonna see changes. But what you may also see, and Andy Staples has made the best suggestions on this, and he said that conferences need to write their grant of rights now that essentially have a Big Ten SEC out clause. That, okay, if the Big Ten offers, you can get out, because that would let you strengthen your conference and write that into it without the fear of one of the things that I had worried about. And I mean, you don't want to say this because the Big Ten would get really angry probably, but if we think back to what happened in 1957, when the way to get rid of those little schools was to create your own new conference. So, the Big Ten is very strong. The Big Ten is their libraries are integrated, their purchasing is integrated, all that. So the Big Ten schools aren't going anywhere. But you might start to see conferences start to say, you know what? We're just all going to form a new conference, and a couple of y'all are not invited. I mean, that's literally what they did when they overthrew the Pacific Coast Conference. And it was funny. I asked John Wilner, it was on his mailbag like 2 weeks before this all blew up, because I was running some numbers, and I was trying to think, how do you get blood out of that Pac-10 stone, the Pac-12 stone, and how do you squeeze blood from it? And I came down to contraction was what made sense to me, and that's not a judge on Wazoo and Washington State and Oregon State, because they might not be the ones you contract, quite honestly, but it seemed to me like you could raise the top line only so much, but then you got to cut out how many people you're sharing it with. And we may start to see that with conferences. That wouldn't necessarily be something to count out, especially as we look to, people say, how would you go to a super league type thing? I mean, I could see it being a situation where you say, okay, you don't necessarily take the whole conference. You take a bunch of people from the conference.
USC Trojans live here every Tuesday at 4 o'clock Eastern, 1 o'clock Pacific time. Matt Zemek makes it all work, and we've done this now 10 consecutive weeks. Please join Matt's work over on Trojans Wire, and we'll get back to the discussion with Tony Altimore, our special guest today. Real quick, Matt, you've unleashed a series of podcasts that is rather special for college football.
Guys, these are really good, by the way.
Yes, and we were just starting to get these on the street. So let us know what everyone's in store for.
Yeah, so I have a great producer. His name's Ian Hest. He's based in Miami, and he's helped me put together a 12-part series called The Riley Files, a deep dive into the career of Lincoln Riley, and we did all 12 episodes. We've recorded all of them. We've published the first episode. We're going to release the other 11 episodes over the next few weeks to get you through July. Like this, it's still the off season. And before August training camp, we can just give you all this insider perspective. And it's from an Oklahoma insider. Keegan Renault does a great job. He used to work at Sooners Wire for a very brief period of time. That's how I got to know him. But since he left Sooners Wire, we've continued a conversation. And so he was the first guy I thought of to just give us the deep inner details on the Oklahoma years for Lincoln Riley. So 12 episodes of just slicing them into like 20-minute episodes. But so 4 hours of conversation chopped into these 12 episodes, getting an inside read on Lincoln Riley. And, so having recorded all 12 episodes, there are some bombshell revelations to come later in the series. We've published the first episode, but you're just going to want to follow every 3 or 4 days. We're going to drop a new episode, and you're going to be able to piece together a lot of the details behind the scenes in terms of what made the Lincoln Riley era at Oklahoma successful, what was left unachieved, why he actually did move to USC, and a lot of other questions. It's really fascinating stuff. And Keegan Renault, you definitely want to follow him for great football insight. He's terrific. He's headed for a bright career in this business. So the Riley Files, it's our podcast series. You don't want to miss it. If you really want a deeper conversation beyond the surface narratives, beyond the national headlines, this is the podcast series for you.
It's fascinating. I just got to hear the first one, and I was captivated by the whole thing. It ended. I was like, no, don't end yet.
We're going to string you along, Tony, with 11 more 20-minute episodes. Yeah.
Hey, it's about my Trojans. So the funny thing is, I was there for the Paul Hackett era, and then the first year of Pete Carroll, and so then we rapidly went ascendant, and it was wonderful. So I feel like I very much feel right now like we were at the beginning of that 2002 season.
Present at the creation. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it's just and you feel it. I think it's going to be exciting for everybody.
Absolutely.
And I love the work that you're doing to help bring that to everybody is really cool.
And Mark, really excited about this series.
Matt, a question for you. What do you think about, as I've looked at how to fill the hole, because I think the other thing is a strong Pac-12 is necessary, or Pac-10, whatever it's going to be, is necessary for USC, even in the Big Ten, because we're still going to play all those teams in every sport. Right. We're going to play Stanford. We're going to play Cal. We're going to play Washington. Just, right now we play UC Santa Barbara and, Loyola Marymount and everybody like that. We're still going to be playing these teams. And so I think that having them be strong is a positive for us. What do you think about the idea of, I did the math and I thought San Diego State and probably SMU. Although I hear right now the Big 12 is a little concerned that the Pac-12 is maybe moving in on their turf on that. But what are your thoughts? Who do you fill the USC UCLA hole with?
See, I don't think you really fill that hole in football. I think that standing on 10 makes the most sense because you're not dividing the pie as much. And I definitely don't think, and this is not a political judgment in terms of whose politics are better or worse. whose ideology I agree with or not. This is just about assessing how chancellors and presidents and power brokers get along in a room. After the overturn of Roe v. Wade, like merging with a school from Texas, that just seems like a political hornet's nest and inviting complications with these West Coast institutions. It just doesn't seem like the right moment for that. So I think that standing at 10, it's not just about fewer splits of the revenue pie. It's I agree with you. Just the cultural fit is terrible. The institutional fit just isn't there. So you don't expand for the sake of expanding. I think that in terms of what the Pac-10 now should do, I think the moves to be made are in basketball. I think you invite Gonzaga as a basketball only member. I think you do what you can to boost your basketball brand, because you've said it yourself. Where do you find the replacement for the value that USC provides? You're not going to find it. So you don't try to just plug in a replacement just because. That's not a strategy. So I think basketball is a place where the Pac-12 needs to focus its energies. You've lost the UCLA basketball brand. So inviting Gonzaga, also perhaps St. Mary's as well, in basketball only, making some sport-specific additions instead of broad universal involvement, especially with the Big Ten travel schedule. Let's just bring in some localized and sport-specific involvements to boost your stock elsewhere. Like if Gonzaga and Arizona are both making the Final Four each year, that's a lot of NCAA tournament win units. That is a significant revenue boost for the conference. So I think George Kliavkoff needs to be creative on that level in terms of what's out there. And of course, the other item is this merger with the ACC. Now, I don't think it's likely to happen, but to me, of the various options other than just standing at 10 Pac-10 schools after the departures of USC and UCLA, the best thing is just to be there at 10. The other really good option is the merger with the ACC, but you probably know this as well as anyone, that why would the ACC, and ESPN in particular, get out of that very friendly deal? That's a great deal for ESPN. Why would ESPN want to break that up and undermine it? So I don't see it happening. But in terms of what the Pac-12 should be doing, I think the ACC merger is right there. And if not, then staying at 10 and maybe doing some things in basketball. I think that's the overall map for the Pac-12.
That's a good point. And one of the things about basketball is that you don't have to share that football money, which is great. So it's like you get the benefit without the negative. And I'll tell you on a side note, one of the things that I've always wondered is why there are 5 UC campuses that are members of the AAU with Division I sports that have never really been major players in sports. And I've kind of always thought that, like, why don't they get Santa Barbara to be a Gonzaga level basketball program? I mean, the schools have all the resources in the world. They're better than most of the Big Ten schools institutionally. One thing is, Mark, I just put a slide up there. So I did some math the other day, Matt, about how much money's left on the table basketball wise. Like, how much could schools actually benefit from basketball? And this is a bit of an eat what you kill model. So it has a twinge of, it could vary. It'd probably be a little more steady between the conferences when in a final negotiated plan. So this is just kind of looking at an eat what you kill model. How much are they leaving on the table in the current deal where the NCAA funds all of the divisions across it and funds itself and the scholarship programs and all that? What if those schools in the major conferences really took what was rightly theirs? And this accounts for making sure that, every school from every conference gets an equivalent share and all that. But just looking at that divided equally, the Big Ten and the Big 12, for example, you're looking at an extra 17 net of 13 million a year that is being really just given away to per school, that's being given away to all of the Division II and Division III schools and running the NCAA and all that. And so if, like you said, if they were to do something like that with Gonzaga or St. Mary's or somebody like that, even San Diego State, who does fantastic in basketball, there is a lot of potential money on the table if they were to really shake up how that CBS money is given out.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a pile of money to be made in hoops, not just football.
And I would think
Agree.
for somebody like the Pac-12, where their revenue is not going to be on, and the Big 12 and the ACC as well, where they're not going to be on as nearly as high as the SEC and the Big 10. I would think that's more you can squeeze from that stone.
Hey, Tony, on this chart that you have posted right now, on the left side, so for example, you've got the Big 12 as the first example. On the left side, the red bar of 17.5 million. The one I'm not putting together is the 3.7 million.
Yeah, so that's not exact, because so the NCAA uses a 6-year rolling average for its units. So that's sort of approximating. It's just actually I wanted these to be the same, same. So I just took 2 years for both. So those numbers are not going to exactly mesh with what the 6-year current rolling average is, but that's about how much they would get today through the units.
Okay.
Again, give or take a little bit, because like I said, it's a 6-year rolling average. But yeah, that's the difference. When you look at the difference between the white line and the colored line, that's how much of sort of, if it was a real eat what you kill world, that's how much they'd be able to take home. And it's a lot.
I don't know what else Matt has, but there's, and I certainly want to respect both of your time. But there was one question I had concerning the LA market. So we've had you on other shows to discuss what fan bases look like. And of course, the Big Ten has targeted and now grabbed the number 2 television market in the country. So that's the crude metric of, okay, it's the second largest group of people watching television. However, how much of that is relevant? How much of it is real? How large is the fan base? How engaged are they? And I know, Tony, that you haven't put this down to a T and nobody truly knows, but what is your take based on all of your research on that LA TV market that's number 2 in the country? How much of it truly can benefit the Big Ten through USC and UCLA?
A lot of it. When we looked at, and I'd have to actually pull the exact numbers up, but USC, let's see here what the fan bases were ranked nationally. Okay, we had USC at number, what's that number? It was like number 13 nationally, UCLA at 28. And this is just with football. Both of those are really high. The thing about LA is it's a lot like New York in that you have people from everywhere. And so those people cheer for teams, from everywhere. And you have a lot of Big Ten people that live in Los Angeles. And so having them play the teams that USC and UCLA, and to folks, the guys that are watching that aren't from California, USC and UCLA run that town as far as fan bases go. And quite honestly, Berkeley and Stanford don't have a lot of fans anyway. And so like USC and UCLA are the teams that people are watching on TV. One year, actually, best job I ever had, which was a volunteer thing. I was the host of the other team's cheerleaders during the games. And which was a lot of fun. Hang out, they got a little sandwich buffet at halftime. They got to all take pictures and play with Traveler the horse and all that. And one of the things that I laughed about, for example, the San Diego State, like the guy cheerleaders from San Diego State, who were all from like Orange County and North County, San Diego, were so excited to be at the Coliseum because they were all USC fans. And so, when you're in Southern California, you go to UCSB, you go to wherever. Our most obnoxious fans in the Coliseum are from like Cal State Northridge. I really get annoyed because they're like screaming at Stanford, like, you suck. And it's like, dude, you didn't even go to USC. You went to Northridge and you're going to scream at Stanford. Like, come on. No, but it's true. Like it's a lot like, like in Georgia, I don't know, the people that go to Emory probably all cheer for UGA. Like it's just, those are the teams. And so for the Big Ten being in there, having those teams, UCLA, we hate them. They have great merchandising, right? They are the most applied to school in the country. The they add enormous value. Our school as well. And so, you get that stuff. And for that to be a Big Ten school, I love, if you guys have not seen the Big Ten networks, it's on YouTube, the Big Ten networks like broadcast of the announcement. I mean, these guys, and these are, real good like sportscasters in the Big Ten network, better than the Pac-12 network. Although we love Yogi is the best. No one's as good as Yogi. They were just in glee saying like the Rose Bowl's a Big Ten venue. The Coliseum's a Big Ten venue. Pauley Pavilion's a Big Ten venue. Dado Field is a Big Ten venue. It was like every new thing they put up, and they were like, oh, I mean, USC has more baseball championships, I think, than the whole Big Ten added together, I'm sure. At least certainly in the post-war era. That kind of, it was like every new stat they were just in glee over. And I think that just kind of, a lot of it says it all. And having that market, having those people go out there, just like I mentioned with USC fundraising in New York, they all want to fundraise in LA. Secret, they all want to fundraise in San Francisco too, which is why I think we might see more. That's going to become a destination for them. I think that the LA market is a whole right now. The reason I think San Diego State will end up maybe not today, right? Maybe they don't want to seem like they're putting the Band-Aid on like today. But I think San Diego State's going to end up there because I think Washington and Stanford and Cal and Arizona State and Arizona, who all have these huge alumni bases in Southern California, need to have games in Southern California. Like, I would not be surprised if we start to see things like Oregon versus Arizona at SoFi Stadium, so that there is a game in California for their alumni and their fans and all their prospective students. I mean, half those kids, look, you go to the ASU campus and look how many California plates there are. Those kids are all from Orange County. They're all from San Diego County. They're all from LA County. And a lot of them are kids that didn't get into UCLA or our favorite institution. And so like they want to have presence there. That's how they recruit their students and their faculty and their donors and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a big hole for the Pac-10. And I think that the Big Ten is just you can watch it on their faces. Like they're just delighting. Like literally every new screen that would come up, they'd be like revering John Wooden, Big Ten coach. And I'll tell you one big thing. And I think this is the thing that said to me more than anything, part of why this was the big move. You know how many Heisman trophies the Big Ten Network says USC has? 7. Not 6. Yeah, we got a little asterisk. That's fine. But they made it clear there were 7. And I mean, I think that's the kind of attitude that shows why we made the move.
All right, Tony, I got to hit you with a couple more questions. One, you mentioned earlier in the show that Nebraska and Minnesota might play Big Ten baseball games in Los Angeles, and now you dropped the idea of Arizona and Stanford playing or Oregon and Stanford playing in SoFi Stadium. So are we seeing a scheduling revolution? Like, do you think like this kind of scheduling idea is going to take root in the not too distant future?
Well, the baseball thing, I think they were just sort of like, I think that was somebody just frustrated with snow more than anything.
But then this football example,
yeah,
I mean,
the football thing would not surprise me, right? Because you want to have games where your alumni are. So, for example, one of the things about USC, and Matt knows this, I'm not talking to you guys, I'm talking to the fans out there. USC they call them the weekend. It started the Weekenders, of course, the Bay Area one that we always do. I think we'll still have those. Will be 2 of our. I think our non-conference games are going to be basically 3 schools. But one of the things that USC has always done is they started to have Weekenders wherever we go. And so, for example, we don't like to play games in places that our fans don't want to go. We want to have games where we bring donors and executives and alumni and all that together. So, for example, when we played Virginia Tech, we did it in D.C. When we played Syracuse, we did it in New York City. When we played Virginia, it's not that far a drive. Base camp was at the Omni Shoreham Hotel in D.C. So I think you're going to see USC will continue that. Of course, when we're going to Big Ten schools, you go to the Big Ten schools, but it'll continue to be a big deal. But I think that losing Southern California, though, the rest of the Pac-10 will need to have presences in the LA market, and I think they will want to have games against us. They're a little testy about it now, but I'll tell you, they're not nearly as testy as the 1950s. UCLA was so mad at the Northwest schools, they put out things that sounded like the State Department talking about North Korea. Literally, USC announced that they were severing athletic relations with the Pacific Northwest. Like they were withdrawing their ambassador and closing the UCLA embassy in Wazoo. No, literally, I have the headlines. It was
I don't doubt it.
Wilbur Johns announced like UCLA was severing athletic relations with everyone except Washington.
Okay, and I got to hit you with this last question. You mentioned earlier that USC should want a Rutgers road game as much as possible, so that you're always getting in New York. What's the home game with a Big Ten school that USC should want every year? Ohio State, Michigan? Which one would it be most advantageous for USC to have in LA as much as possible?
Nebraska, because they'll all buy tickets. And if I'm a student, I might scout my Nebraska ticket and go to Palm Springs for the weekend. That's the wrong answer. But it's true. those Nebraska tickets, though. I mean, I love Nebraska. I mean, I remember when Nebraska came to the Coliseum, right? Like they brought all their fans. It was awesome. I mean, I think you want to have those Michigan-Ohio State games. I also think you want to save those Michigan-Ohio State games a little bit for the league championship.
Yeah.
We might be the Big Ten West, however that works. Now, I'm a proponent because 46 times we've now played the Big Ten championship game on January 1st at 2 p.m. Pacific in the city of Pasadena. So I've actually advocated, and I think we may go to this in this new playoff model, something more to that. I mean, the Big Ten should have a 4-game playoff at least.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, it should just be
conference quarterfinals, semifinals, title game. Yes,
I think so. And and I love the scheduling they did in the
quarterfinals.
Oh, why not?
If we get to 20 team conferences, absolutely. I think now under 16 teams, you should definitely have conference semifinals.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And
TV friendly, big bucks.
How fun would those be? Yeah. How fun would it be if the Big Ten championship, because there, whose alumni, by the way, run the Tournament of Roses committee? I think they're in red and baby blue. And so, that seems to me like the perfect place for the Big Ten championship to be. And if you guys have ever read Matt Brown's book, What If, which is a phenomenal book, he talks about the airplane conference, which we tried to put together in the 50s. It failed. We ended up hiring the guy who planned it as the first Pac-10 commissioner. But one of the things that he suggested is because of weird politics of the 50s, that had that actually gone through, that's probably what the Rose Bowl would have become, was the first championship game of the airplane conference. It would have been, Notre Dame or Pitt or Syracuse or whoever against USC, UCLA, Stanford, or Cal. And so I would not surprise me if that was just a way that things just worked out really well. And I mean, do the same thing there. Have the Big 12 champion in the Pac or in the SEC champion meet in the Sugar Bowl, and then the winner plays in some big NFL stadium somewhere.
Yep.
That's what I would do.
Man,
if
Tony, you're so good. I'm really so glad to have met you and had this conversation with you.
You too. Awesome. We'll have to do it again sometime with fewer boring charts.
They're great charts. But man,
if we go to quarterfinals,
great work.
If we go to quarterfinals and even possibly semifinals, there has to be a flex schedule in the Big Ten. There would have to be a flex schedule for everybody else.
Sure.
I love flex schedule. Now, the SEC won't like quarterfinals because the SEC doesn't like to accept that SEC teams, believe it or not, sometimes they can lose. And that they do not like to admit that is a possibility. But there's one team that throughout history, one bad afternoon in Dallas aside, there's one team that throughout history has smashed the SEC regularly, and it drives them nuts because they're not impressed by them. And that is the Trojans. Because I remember when we played Auburn, and most of our student section thought it was probably somewhere up by Stockton, maybe near Fresno. Was it part of the Cal State system? They weren't really sure. They didn't care. They were like, do you guys want to go to the Auburn game? People were like, it's in Alabama. And they were like, why are we playing there? I thought it was in Stockton. Oh, well, okay, never mind. You never thought twice about it. And that is, by the way, what drives the SEC crazy about USC is that we represent everything, like you mentioned, Mark, culturally. We represent everything culturally that they cannot stand, and we beat the snot out of them historically. And we do. By the way, the guys, that is backed up by data. You can at me on Twitter all you want in anger, but like that is what one afternoon in Dallas aside, when Lane Kiffin and Sark got their revenge, we've always done that.
And, Tony, you know this as well as I do. If only we had a 4-team playoff during the Pete Carroll era, man, we would have gone up against Urban Meyer and all those guys, and we would have kicked their butt.
That we would have, because here's the thing: USC historically, like, we will lose in Corvallis on September 17th, but we'll beat you in the bowl game. Corvallis. That I always tell everyone, if you really want to scare a USC person, like, to the bone, just chill them and just make their world cold. Just say, you're in Corvallis. It's Friday night and it's raining.
Exactly.
And USC,
that's the biggest game of this season. That's the biggest game of this season. If USC wins that, USC is set. And if USC loses that, then we could see some problems.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I respect the Beavs. I mean, Pat
yes,
Shine
they're a thorn in our sides.
Yeah, and Pat Shine at Washington State runs a phenomenal athletic department. Like, I want those schools to succeed, and that's why I want that conference to succeed. I think they will.
Well, I am juiced up, and I got to think Southern California fans, meaning just not Trojan fans, but UCLA fans located in Southern California. The grind of Washington State and Stanford and Oregon State and Cal funneling through the Rose Bowl and the Coliseum year after year to be displaced by a roster in the Big Ten that goes like 7 or 8 deep of Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Purdue. Even in that second or third rung, the Purdue's and Minnesotas provide some interesting matchups. I just have to think that that's going to bring a lot of juice to the scene there at the Rose Bowl and the LA Coliseum.
It will. I'll tell you one thing that was kind of funny. So the year that I was the other team's cheerleader host, I think it was that year. I don't know. I had sideline. I worked at I was sideline pass for lots of things, but like, I was there with the Purdue kids, the Purdue team in the tunnel, and in the tunnel of the Coliseum. If you guys haven't seen, USC has like a real nice brag wall, and it does exactly what it's supposed to. It is designed so that the other team stands there waiting to take the field, and they look up at the list of the 35 years that we've played in the Rose Bowl. Purdue's played in what, 2, 3, 1? I don't know how many Rose Bowls Purdue has.
No more that I can think of.
I think it's 2. And so I watched the Purdue kids. Like, I watched their eyes. This is the Purdue team who goes to Columbus, who goes to Ann Arbor. And I watched their eyes get real big as they were looking at the U.S. And I think we were number 8 in the country. It was the John Robinson years. We did not finish number 8 in the country. But it was impressive how, like, they were impressed that they were in the Coliseum. My dad's friends who played football with my dad at Michigan State will always laugh because they played USC a couple times, and they'd be like, "Oh, you went to USC," and they'd shake their hands and go, "I hate that effing horse," because I think USC rung their bell pretty bad in the Coliseum, and Traveler made many, many laps around that old track. And so, those kinds of things I think it's going to be cool for the fans. It's going to be cool for the Big Ten fans. The lighting of the Coliseum torch is going to be the new jump around. So it's going to be pretty cool. And I think USC fans are going to like it. I think eventually, it'll settle into a bit of a, in the end, Indiana won't be that much more exciting than Oregon State is today, but it's going to be something new and it's going to be energizing. I think that's going to be really good for the fan base.
Folks, he is Tony Altamore, and please follow him on Twitter. It's a tremendous follow right there, and you can catch up with all of his charts and graphs and metrics right there. And Tony is involved in engaging with everyone, so please consider not picking a fight with him. But I've seen many of those break out too.
Yeah,
so
please don't do that, guys. By the way, whatever your team is number one. I believe it. Whoever your team is that's watching, your team is number one. And guys, I love the sport. You're just like Mark and Matt. I think the stronger the sport is, we want as many of these teams to succeed as we can. And one of the things I thought was impressive with the Pac-12 last year, when those Big 12 teams, they all wanted to leave. And the Pac-12 probably could have taken 1 or 2 of them, and that would have been devastating. But George Kliavkoff talked about how it was important that the Big 12 succeed. It was important to the sport. And I think it's similarly should be important to the sport for everyone else today that the Pac-10 succeed. So I'm cheering for your teams too, because I got all kinds of friends who went there.
Everybody follow Tony at TJ Altimore. You see it right there on the banner. And of course, Matt Zemek makes all this happen each and every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Pacific time. Follow Matt right there at Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. And as is customary, we've got the most viewers at the conclusion of the show. So you know what you need to do. Just hang out right here. You can watch the completion of the show. You can watch everything that you missed. And just keep in mind that you can be here on time every Tuesday at 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific. Any parting words, Matt?
Just thank you, Tony. Really appreciate all your insight and hard work.
And thank you, Matt. I'll tell you, for those of you guys watching, if you haven't heard the Riley Files podcast yet, listen away. Now there's all bombshells. I can't wait, Matt. You're killing me here. Looking forward to it. Hey, great job with that. Thank you guys for having me.
Matt, Tony, thank you so much. If you want more college football here immediately, we're talking Iowa football over on the Hawkeyes channel live here in about 10 minutes. See you then.